Good evening, everyone. My name is Kevin Proto. I am the creator and founder behind Locals Supporting Locals, and I'd like to thank everybody for coming this evening. I would like to give a very big thank you to Orlin. He is the new owner and proprietor of Smith & Company here, and he's been very kind to donate this room for this evening's talk here. And of course, we are here for a couple of reasons. And for some of it, it's in regards to the smart meters, the AMR smart meters, the wireless. Some of it's for this health and safety. Some of it's for the privacy. And a lot of us, no matter what, it's all about the rising bills because they just keep going up no matter what, and it doesn't seem to matter even if it's with analog meters now. I think it's very important for me to get across to you who I am and why I started Locals Supporting Locals, because this is far from the last meeting pertaining to food and Monsanto. There's many, many issues out there, and what it all leads back to is corporatization, industrialization, and privatization, globalization, and it doesn't seem to be benefiting any of us in any way, shape, or form. And I put together something that I feel is the true solution to a lot of the problems we have today. I put together this calendar here, okay, because this is truly what the solution is here. It's about keeping our money local. This calendar here is the main focus on all our local mom and pops here in the South Okanagan, as well as who our farmers are, what they grow, and how to find them, resources going back. I have a message here of how we need to unite as a community here because we're divided because of race, color, creed, religion, politics, whatever it may be. And so we call it the heartbeat of the Okanagan, and I go get the feeling of you guys. You know, so I ask you what's bothering you, and you tell me your concerns. What I've done for this evening here is I actually brought in some speakers to speak to the issues that were here tonight. There, Farron was kind enough to come up here. He was doing a presentation down in Kelowna, and so I had him come up and stop through here. And he's an environmental consultant, okay? So he's going to put together a quick presentation on the smart meters because there are people here that are very concerned about the health and the safety of these. And I actually have Deborah, that was kind enough also to come down from Peachland. She's the lady you probably saw in the news that actually had her, her and her husband, Don, actually went and ordered an analog meter online. They put in all their letters and everything to say, I don't want this smart meter. Do not put it on my house. Health and safety, blah, blah, blah. Keep your money local, support your local farmers, support your local mom and pops. They are the heart of our community. Without them, we don't have little league teams. We don't have a lot of the things that make a community here. They get out there, they gotta know that you care. The council meetings, you know, you gotta go down to the council meetings. That's the only way that you can push them to what we want or need in our community. They need to know that we're standing there. So now in saying that, Farron here is going to do a quick presentation here on the health and safety and many of the concerns with the smart meters.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Kevin. Everybody have their cell phones off? Batteries off? Put under the tires of the car, drive over them. So as you can see, this is me, and I am also a director for Citizens for Safe Technology.org. I'm one of the founding directors, and we started that in 2006 when we had some questions about Wi-Fi in schools and wireless technology, cell towers, people wanting to protest the installation of towers and antennas on buildings, and that's how Citizens for Safe Technology started. And I work as a consultant or advise Citizens for Safe Technology as a consultant. And our presentation tonight is going to be on turbo because Nelson wants to speak. Kevin might have some other things to say, and I think Doug back there is going to say something. So we're going to go through this fairly quick, but our presentation is about electropollution, direct current, alternating current, AC/DC. We got a little topic there about connecting dots because a lot of people don't understand that wireless technology has really invaded our lives somewhat sneakily. That's a technical word. We're going to go into some health and safety risks just briefly. The smart meter is why a lot of people are here, I'm sure. And we're going to look at solutions because this is all fixable. So, but we want to start with what's natural, what occurs naturally in the world. And the Earth, believe it or not, how many people knew that the Earth actually has a heartbeat? Oh, right. This is great. Get some people from Vancouver to come up here and what's going on. that was interesting, whatever happened on the screen there. And that cycle, that heartbeat of the Earth is 7.8 cycles per second. And it's created by lightning strikes, approximately 200 lightning strikes per second, somewhere on the face of the Earth. And to give you an example of what the human body functions on, you have their brainwave activity at 4 to 30 cycles per second. You have the heart at 2 cycles per second. And you have the pineal gland, which secretes melatonin, which helps you sleep. It's the #1 antioxidant in the world for testicular cancer, brain cancer, and also breast cancer. And this is a little photo of some lightning strikes taking place in the prairies. I'll just skip over that one. This is a statement from Robert O. Becker, who was, as you can see, he's twice nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for his work in looking at what's called the body electric, which was, this is his book. And this is what he had to say. I have no doubt in my mind that at the present time, the greatest polluting element on the Earth's environment is the proliferation of electromagnetic fields. Now, this is some of the electromagnetic fields that are man-made. You can see they're created by hydroelectric dams, coal-fired power plants, wind turbines, solar panels. Solar panels, wind turbines, they all have their own inherent difficulties. They're not smooth sailing. Electrical fields being emitted from house wiring, lighting, compact fluorescent light bulbs. Some of these are up here. TVs, home appliances, computers. We have magnetic fields being generated around electric motors, blenders, heating elements in stoves, flooring, all that. So I'm going to skip through this. This is a picture of the electromagnetic spectrum. And right now we're at the bottom, the left-hand side of the screen. You can see there we've got wall plugs, cathode ray tube monitors, we've got TVs, wiring for buses, trams, and we're going to move up the spectrum. Now, I recently put this in here because it's now coming out in the Globe and Mail, the Toronto Sun, the Vancouver Sun. People are starting to wake up to the evilness of these compact fluorescent light bulbs. And you can see there, I wrote down a number of things, and they have done a lot of tracking, and they've determined that 98% of these bulbs wind up in the dump. However, if you do break one, you're supposed to clear the room and call the hazardous material people to get them to clean it. Yeah.
Fluorescent tubes use mercury as an element
Yeah.
to cause the ignition, the lighting of the gases.
Yeah.
When they're heated up like that, the mercury actually becomes a vaporous form. So when you break a fluorescent tube or a compact fluorescent, that vapor mercury is now in your environment and you're breathing it in. So if you break a fluorescent tube or a compact fluorescent, that mercury is now vaporous and it's in your respiratory system. Yes, when you dump one of those, each compact fluorescent you dump in landfill can poison up to 5,000 liters of water.
Adding to his point there, you can see that second line from the bottom. The broken bulb releases 8 times the level of mercury considered safe for an adult, but it's 8,000 times the level for a child. But we've tested, over the years, we've tested lots of houses, and it's surprising. If you're on a medication for diabetes or for blood thinners like warfarin or something like that, and you're sitting next to these bulbs, you can get severe burns. So one of the things that I want to mention is these, some dirty electricity is not something that's been, many people here know what dirty electricity is, or have you heard of it? Yeah. This is something that has come of age in the last 10 years, in the last probably 20 years with the inclusion of electronics into our lifestyles. And BC Hydro's infrastructure was never really set up to handle electronic signatures. And so we get a lot of dirty electricity on the lines. And one of the biggest offenders is the smart meter. And that is due to the fact that they have a device inside the meter that switches the power from alternating current to direct current. And when it does that, it generates a harmonic resonance or an energy field that's on the building's electrical system. And I have meters and filters and things that I check it. Plug them in, it's very, very high in here, most likely contributed to by these compact fluorescents. They create a lot of dirty electricity. And you can see there on the screen, you see the blue line, wave line, that is the alternating current flow of electrical lines in a house. The squiggly purple lines there, that's dirty electricity, and that's off of an oscilloscope. And now we're just going to move right into the smart meter, but also a little explanation about radio frequency radiation or microwave. So now we're in the middle of the energy spectrum. And what we want to call our attention, your attention to, is the fact that there's information that's carried on a wireless signal, and it's called information carrying radio waves. And they are 2 milliseconds long. And our bodies have no historical reference for this kind of signal. So the body goes into something called sympathetic lock, and it's a fight or flight. It doesn't, not sure what it's going to do. That's part of the autonomic nervous system. You have two components to the autonomic nervous system. One's the parasympathetic, that runs your heart rate, your breathing, all of those activities. They're just complete. They go on without you even knowing until they fail, and then you do, big time. But then they have the sympathetic part of the nervous system, which is where your adrenals come into play, and where, when you have a close call in a car accident and you get your heart rate starts going really quick and you get kind of on edge, that's a sympathetic system. And what they found when they did studies back in the 90s is that due to exposure to microwave energy, particularly cell phones and high intensity microwave, that your cells in the body are supposed to be open, like my fingers are open. And what that does is that allows nutrients to go into the cell and toxins to be released from the cell. When it goes into sympathetic lock, it goes like this. So what happens then is it locks toxins into the cell and it keeps nutrients out of the cell. And that was the work of Dr. George Carlo. You can look that up online. Type him in, he's got reams and reams of material. And I've been doing a lot of research lately to find out, does anybody know what a fractal antenna is? Antenna? A fractal antenna is every cell in your body is a fractal antenna. And it's an antenna that reproduces itself. So it's always either square, it's always round, and there's actually a lot of work being done around fractal energy. But wouldn't you know it, cell phones use fractal antennas. That's how they do it. So the body is a magnet for this particular kind of energy that's being generated by a microwave, by microwave energy. So here we are right up in the microwave spectrum in the middle, and then here's some examples of what are called decked phones, the black phones there at the top on the left. Those transmit at anywhere from 2.4 billion cycles per second to 5.8 billion cycles per second. And the downside of the decked phones, not only do they transmit a lot of wireless energy, I tested some yesterday, they were 20,000 microwatts, and in terms of building biology standards and health standards, what seems to be safe is something around 100. And these cordless phones were at 22,000. And the decked phones, and it says DECT on the phone, which stands for Digitally Enhanced Cordless Telephone. And they transmit 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And I could easily pick up a decked phone if it was out on the street. Just turn on my meter here and I would pick it up. And a lot of people, believe it or not, hopefully none of the people in this room, have a decked phone on one side of the bed and a decked phone on the other side of the bed. Hubby has one, wife has one. And a lot of people then have a cell phone the same way. Now the little device on the bottom is a wireless baby monitor. That pad you see there, that slips underneath the mattress, and one of those is a sending unit and one is a receiver. So the sending unit is the one on it's one on the left, and it tells you when the baby rolls over or cries or something like that. So you have one unit in the bedroom and the other one's in the kitchen or wherever you're watching TV or whatever. But they transmit at 2.4 billion cycles per second. Remember how I started? 7.8 cycles per second is the heartbeat of the Earth. And now we're at 2.4 billion cycles per second. So here is something I call connecting the dots. And a lot of us have all of these things in our house. Cordless phone, cell phone. You can see the cordless phones, the old ones are 900 megahertz. That's 900 million. 2.4, 5.8. The cell phones are different frequencies. And for those of you who want to make your home a little bit safer, I highly recommend getting rid of all the wireless technology. You won't believe the difference it'll make. It'll take some time, because if you're becoming hypersensitive, it could take you 6 months, particularly if you've got a wireless router. And you can see Xbox, Wii games, they are transmitting even when they're turned off. And they transmit a lot because the The Xbox or the Wii game is always looking for the remote control. Just like a cordless phone is always looking, the base station's looking for the cordless phone for the handset. We found a lot of people being very sensitive to security systems. They have battery backup, some of them are wireless. The RFID chips on the bottom, radio frequency identification tag, those are being, Kevin and I were talking about this over supper, they're now put in the waistbands of pants. They're in a lot of clothing. And what's actually happening, I want to bring you up to speed about something that's happening with these frequencies across the bottom. Terahertz frequency is the airport scanners. You know, where you go through, they're called a naked body scanner. Those are all being turfed out because of the damage and also a lot of a lack of integrity among the people operating the systems. A lot of published photos came out on the internet. And, but what they didn't realize, and some scientists did some research, that the terahertz actually unzips, not your pants, it unzips DNA, actually splits it open. And Tetra is a communication system used by the military in Europe, the fire, police, ambulance, and it is particularly nasty. It's a very low frequency, and wouldn't you know it, lovely BC Hydro just signed the first contract in North America to use Tetra. So that's going to be all their communication devices. And in Europe, where they use these, the police officers use the lapel microphones that sit up here and they talk like this. They were getting cancer in the collarbone. They use the same thing for some of the radar systems. They were getting cancer all over their bodies. Same thing with firemen. And here is an example of what transpires for kids in school using wireless internet. And just when you think that it's safe to go to work and your kids are off being radiated, this is the workplace. This is very similar to a place I just tested in downtown Vancouver, where there's so many different frequencies in the building. This is 9 floors, 600 people, that the systems are starting to fail. Because one's 200, one's 2.4, one's 5.8, one's transmitting over there, they've got Aruba routers, Cisco routers, D-Link routers. Everybody's got a cell phone for the family, one for the business, and when you look under the desks, it looks like a rat's nest of wiring. And they're all, so many of them are sick. It's not a day. So many people, the managers told me that they're losing a lot of work days. And they called me in to see if I could figure out what was wrong with all the systems. And they didn't care the fact that it was 6,000 microwatts coming in the window from the cell towers in downtown Vancouver. So now we're up here to the lovely smart meter. And if you don't know, I want to explain to you that the smart meters have 2 antennas in them. One is 908 megahertz. We've tested it on a spectrum analyzer. It's exactly 908. But they also have another transmitter in there, which is 2.4 gigahertz, which is designed to communicate with your smart appliances. The smart appliances haven't made their way into Canada yet. They're in the United States, but LG has just finished making 11 million of them. And and how that's going to work is you're going to be able to, with your cell phone, your smartphone, you're going to be able to call home and ask the fridge if the ingredients in the fridge are enough to make vegetarian lasagna. And the fridge will tell you whether, you might be short the noodles or the tomato sauce or something. But I actually saw the demonstration from the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, where they actually had a young lady walk up with an iPhone, called the fridge, asked the fridge if it had this, and the fridge said no, and she got a message on the phone what they needed. And you can call the stove and turn it on, turn it off, the microwave, the heating, the ventilating, air conditioning. It's all going to be accessible. But what that means is that you could have a dozen 2.4 gigahertz transmitters in your appliances trying to talk to the smart meter and your smartphone. So it kind of looks like, here's an example of the smart meter daisy chain on the left there. All the yellow ones are the smart meters. They're going to talk to each other. And then you can see the appliances in the house. Here's a better picture here. So here's some smart appliances. So they could be on multiple floors in the home. And you're going to get all these crosstalking. You can see the wireless router access point in the middle there. Does it show up on the screen? Yeah, it does. So these are the chip that's in the smart meter is 2.4 gigahertz. It's called a Zigbee chip. It'll go for a long ways. It'll go about 2 miles. So imagine what it's going to be like in a neighborhood with 100 houses, and maybe each house has got one smart appliance, but everybody's going to be using cell phones and talking back and forth. You're going to have all these smart meters talking to each other, going to a hub meter, which BC Hydro says they do not need to divulge who gets the hub meter. The hub meter means you get 3 antennas in your meter. And then that hub meter is going to broadcast to a collector antenna. And cruising around today, I didn't see any collector antennas here, but they're not really fully deployed. They're not even moving right along. This is off of BC Hydro's literature. And so we want to debunk a couple of the myths here. One of the things that they say is that smart meters communicate for an average of 1 minute per day. However, when you break it down, in 1 minute, there are 60,000 milliseconds. So that means you've got 30,000 2-millisecond pulses in a day, if it's 1 minute. However, when the court challenged Pacific Gas and Electric in California, which uses the same technology, to bring forth all of the transmissions required, meter to meter, meter to... They've got the cordless phones, they've got cell phones, they might have Xbox, they might have games going on, they're using a microwave oven all the time, and the meter might tip them a little bit, but boy, they're well on the way. There's a lot of factors in this. It's not all about the smart meters, and trust me, I'm not in favor of the smart meters, but there's a lot of factors, and people's overall health condition is really important with this. And you can see there's a few of the symptoms down there: migraine, sleep disorders, anxiety, fatigue, mood changes. And also show you some of the failures of our government and the health industry that they didn't learn anything about the early warnings about thalidomide, tobacco, asbestos, tainted blood, Vioxx, prednisone, all these different things that are coming out. I mean, we've been talking about pesticides and lead in paint for 40 years, and it's still around. And food additives, radio frequency radiation. I mean, are we getting lots of warnings? We are getting warnings about that this is a technology that needs to be examined and studied. And unfortunately, there's no more control groups because everybody's inundated with the wireless radiation. So I wanted to also let you know I think there's a little bit of a dark side to the wireless industry in the sense that in 1996, when the research started to come out about wireless technology and how it was affecting the blood-brain barrier and calcium ion release and DNA damage and all that the telecommunications industry put together a Telecommunications Act wherein they granted themselves their own immunity. So you cannot sue a wireless service provider for a tumor, even if it says Motorola, and it says it's on the side of your head. So here's some of the other effects that it can have. I've already mentioned the blood-brain barrier, calcium ion, DNA damage, and there's a slide coming up that will show how that's been tested. People are having blurred vision, ringing in the ears. It's very, very common, ringing of the ears.
We're surrounded by more wireless frequencies, and we have been since the dawn of time. We've been bombarded with the entire spectrum of radio frequency transmissions since the sun started shining. By the data collection portion of a smart meter is minuscule compared to your wireless telephone, your Xbox, your Wii, or your wireless router in your house. Mm-hmm. The smart meter is 1/10 of 1% of the rest of that radio frequency you're currently being exposed to. The fear of smart meters should not be the wireless transmission, but the ability to collect data and assemble rate scheduling. For example, you come home from work, you turn your stove on at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, guess what? You're paying a lot more.
Yeah.
Instead of paying the same amount of money all throughout the day for your electricity, you're going to be charged a different time for a different date. In California, we have up to 36 different time periods in a day when you can be charged a different rate. Currently in Ontario, it's 7.
This is on the right-hand side, you can see some of the other cancer, the risks, the cancer risks, the blood, the tumors, etc. And one of the things that I'm more passionate about is the effect on the honeybees. There's been lots of studies done, particularly in Germany and down in California. The U.S. Department of Fish and Wildlife has done a lot of studies around honeybees, migratory birds. They've been tracking the bird deaths. They've been experimenting with cordless phones, cell towers, and noticing degeneration of the bee population very quickly. And here's my good friend Lisa on the right, who's 92 years old and fighting the smart meters quite a lot. And then little Gabrielle on the left-hand side there. So what they've noticed with around the world with scientific tests and studies is that people that have multiple chemical sensitivity, so that's to fragrances and things of that nature, they are more likely to become allergic to electromagnetic fields, particularly the wireless. And where they treat electrohypersensitivity in Europe, the Paracelsus Clinic and Dr. Ray's clinic down in Texas, one of the things they find that people that are electrosensitive have a lot of mercury fillings or a lot of extensive dental work, like root canals, failed root canals in particular. And they've had quite a few previous illnesses. There could be diabetes, there could be cancer, major surgery, and people that my ex-wife actually has ALS right now, and unfortunately she spent literally years on a cell phone and on a cordless phone, but she was also a stained glass artist during that same time. So she's breathing lead fumes on a regular basis. And it has been diagnosed, her diagnosis took quite a while to determine, but they clearly stated that it was not genetic, it was environmentally induced. And you can see there's the two gentlemen I was talking about that work for the U.S. Department of Fish and Wildlife, Dr. Reese Halter and Dr. Albert Manville. He's the head of the U.S. Department of Fish and Wildlife. He's deeply concerned. And you can see Dr. Dennis Henshaw there, who's in a very, very good documentary film called Resonance. Beings of Frequency is the name of it. And he talks about 8,000 different articles showing the effects of low-level radiation and its effect on animal navigation, plants, and health of animals. And then I just put this slide up to show how the pollinators contribute to our well-being on the planet. And you can see that bees, interestingly enough, they pollinate mainly vitamin C style type of plants, and our lovely GMO company Monsanto is now working on genetically modifying bees. Just in case we run out of bees, they can come to the rescue. And Barry Trower, who's a scientist and a military advisor, very similar to Jerry Flynn, who gives some talks around this area. He has some serious questions about whether or not the communication industry will be the final straw for our planet's ecosystem. And he's been studying this since the 30s. Very, very brilliant man. And this is for people who would like to see some evidence. This is people speaking out the Freiburg Appeal, 6,000 physicians who are concerned about the effect on people. The American Academy of Environmental Medicine, 250 doctors, they came out and talked about how it's affecting their patients and how it's interfering with the care. The World Health Organization came out in 2011 and made a statement that they reclassified wireless radiation as 2B carcinogen, possible cause of cancer. Now I understand now the lobbying by the wireless industry, the World Health Organization, is to rescind that and drop it, the warning label. And this covers all wireless devices. And then we have the Bioinitiative report, which is probably one of the most famous. The first report came out in 2007, and that was 12 scientists who reviewed 2,000 scientific papers, peer-reviewed, replicated, very detailed analysis of all that. And they came out with these various things of the adult leukemia, cancers, risk of Alzheimer's, ALS, neurodegenerative diseases. And then they did another Bioinitiative report in 2012. This time it was 29 scientists. They added another 1,800 papers to it, and they came out with the same conclusions. And what needs to be mentioned is that the 2007 study was from information gathered in 2000. So in the year 2000, there weren't a lot of cell phones. Now there's over 6 billion cell phones in use. I understand it's even higher than that now, because they're being sold at a record pace as they get smarter and smarter. And you can see Leonard Cardell, who has, at the very bottom there, who's come under a lot of attack over the years, particularly lately, is that the epidemiological evidence shows the radio frequency radiation should be classified as a human carcinogen. Not a probable, not a possible, but as a human carcinogen. And he is a very brilliant scientist. Now here's the COMET assay that was mentioned in the previous slide. And you can see there that this is the work of Dr. Henry Lai. And you can see where you have no radiation or no exposure on the left-hand side of the sham. And you can see this is an example of the cell. And you can see on the right-hand side, after 1,600 X-rays, you get a tail on it. It looks like a comet tail, so that's why they call it a comet assay. And then down below, you can see 24-hour mobile phone exposure, and that's got the same style of tail. So you see the equivalent there, 1,600 chest X-rays, 24 hours exposure. Now, is anybody here who does not know what the blood-brain barrier is? Oh, man. Okay. What's that?
Goes backwards.
What's that?
How many understand?
Yeah. How many understand the blood-brain barrier? Three people. Good way to go, Ted. Thanks. So this is a barrier. It's a molecular barrier that's around the brain, and it's there to prevent toxins from getting into the brain, and it's to allow for allow nutrients to get in, and for nutrients to get in and toxins to get out. But what happens? What they found, Dr. George Carlo found this out, is that when you're exposed to a 2-minute phone call, the blood-brain barrier lowers for about 20 minutes. So then that allows toxins to get into the brain that couldn't get in there before. And if you don't think that's significant, you check the pharmaceutical industry, and they are racing to figure out some way to get chemicals in the form of drugs to get into the brain. So they're working on nanotechnology. This was some of the work that scared the death out of Dr. George Carlo and his 200 scientists. And that's when he went to the wireless industry. And incidentally, he was paid by the wireless industry to prove that the phones were safe. And when he started finding out about DNA damage and compromised blood-brain barrier and that sort of thing, he went to the industry, they fired him immediately, cut his funding, and all of a sudden, mysterious things started to happen to George Carlo. He lost his credibility as a lawyer and as a doctor, and his marriage ended, his big, beautiful mansion in Georgia burned to the ground, and all the conspiracy stuff started. But the long and the short of it is that he's not really involved in this anymore. He's written a book, he's doing some talks, but he was one of the pioneers in bringing to light all of the harmful effects of some of this technology. And now we have things that we can use to shield this, and I have some things right here that I can show you. We've done this on many places where they have transmitting smart meters in Vancouver. And this is a carbon graphite-based paint. This is just a piece of plywood, and it has a ground tape on the back of it. And when this gets painted on, the paint actually acts as basically an antenna for electrical fields. So the fields have to be grounded. And there's a plate that goes on the back you can see the tape is right here, and there's a metal plate that gets clipped to there, and then you put your regular top coat like this yellow or something around it, and it will drain all the electrical fields away. And then this is a curtain material that comes out of Switzerland that blocks 99% of radiation coming through a window. And you can see this is a piece off of the drape. It's got a rod pocket at the top, so you can slide it on a curtain rod. And it works very well.
Grounded?
Pardon me?
You
No.
have to ground that?
No. And then this one, this is a type of foil that has come out. It's quilted. You can't tear it or anything. And this goes on for people who are doing a major renovation, and it's gone to the studs. They put this on the wall, and then they ground this. And this blocks the RF coming in, and it also drains away the electrical. And then this is my coat. This is my coat that I wear when I go into a wireless environment. It's got argamesh fabric in it, and if anybody doesn't think that it works, you can go outside, face a cell tower, and put this on and open the coat, and you'll feel like your body's being heated, because it actually acts like a parabolic reflector, and it draws in, and it's quite amazing what it does. And people use bed canopies that come from Europe, And the foil on the windows is different than it's like a window foil that they put on car windows, and it will block the RF coming in. So here's some suggestions for people who might want to take the precautions of, if they listen to this or they do some research and they find out that they'd like to remove themselves out of the wireless environment or do some things. You can hardwire computers. Schools can be hardwired. Incidentally, most of the schools are already hardwired. The wiring is already in the walls. And most of the schools have got drop T-bar ceilings in them, and the wiring is just sitting up there. I've been in many schools. You just lift up the tile, and there's all the blue wiring sitting up there. And then, sighting and sensitive sighting for cell towers. Move them away from schools and downtown cores. You can also turn them down. They don't need to be as powerful as they are. I've taken cell phones and wrapped them up in this fabric where I cannot pick them up by the meter, but people can still make a call. So there's lots of room for them to be turned down. For people who use a phone for business and need to use it, there's another type of headset you can get called a Bluetooth, not a Bluetooth. And it's very cool. If you have a phone clipped to your waist and you have a wire that runs up to your shoulder, and then from the shoulder to the earpiece is a stethoscope technology. So it's a hollow tube, and they're crystal clear, and you don't get any radiation going into your head. But you do get it riding up your body. So these are some of the things that we found to be effective. Obviously, avoiding exposure to electromagnetic fields. In Japan, they came up with something called shiku, and it's forest bathing. And it's just leave your cell phone at home, go for a walk in the park, go for a walk on the beach, go somewhere where you're going to be able to enjoy some negative ions coming from the forest or the ocean or the sand. The people that are treating this in Europe and down into Texas are saying no GMO foods. What's really interesting, if you talk to Jeffrey Smith, who made a movie called Genetic Roulette, he's recognized that the symptoms for electrohypersensitivity are exactly the same as they are for genetically modified food. And of course, eat locally. We've got wonderful produce and especially food around here. A number of electricians that I know in Vancouver use what are called mineral baths. They use either Himalayan salt or they use Epsom salts, mixed 2 cups of each into a very hot bath. You sit in it for 15 minutes, relaxes the muscles, and for some reason it seems to take away the agitation that as you know, a lot of electricians work hot. So we've also found that, and I've tested this repeatedly, you can have some meters or something transmitting on one side of a hedge or cedar trees. You're going to get, you pass over to the hedge the other side, and it cuts the radiation levels by about 3/4. So plant lots of sappy trees. Try not to be sappy. When I mentioned something about the bed canopy. A lot of people use the bed canopies now, which is this fabric. There's 3 different lines of this, but they basically make like an insect repellent tent that hangs over the head, all 4 walls, and on the floor, depending if there's a field of radiation coming up from the floor. And it's quite remarkable the difference in sleep, especially if you've got a lot of wireless radiation around you, your sleep is disturbed. I do something called a body voltage test in houses. That's where I measure how people are coupled to the electricity flowing in the walls. Usually you have a plug on either side of the bed. I lay them in the bed, give them a multimeter, and I measure the number of millivolts they're attracted to the wall. And then I just show them as an example, I just have them lie in the bed, everything's fine. And if they've got a metal headboard and they touch the metal headboard, it's going to go up by double. And if they touch the wall, it'll go up about a third. And the Europeans have known about this for some time, and they created something called a demand switch. And the demand switch gets wired into the circuit breakers on the panel that correspond to the room that's bringing up the high body voltage. And the demand switch senses when you go to bed and you turn off the last light switch, the demand switch says, oh, no power needed to go to the bedroom, I'm going to shut down the current. And that's what it does. And people swear by them, they don't swear at them.
But a lot of people have old clock radios and old appliances in their home, and these measurements that you're talking about, if you measure the electromagnetic radiation off of a clock radio that's approximately 25 years old, some of these old appliances that we hang on to because they still work.
Yep.
They're great old appliances.
Yep.
Hang on to your old fridge as long as you want. It's going to cost you an extra $25, $30 a month, and it's going to surround you in electromagnetic fields because it has a larger motor, larger piece of equipment, it's heavier built. It's not a better appliance.
No.
So people have to understand that they got to start getting rid of some of these old appliances that they don't need.
We find that a lot of houses that we go into and test, and I check every wall plug, and it tells me if I've got current on the ground or if it's wired correctly. And it's amazing when we test for the dirty electricity, the harmonic resonance on the line, we find that if the grounds are corrected, the dirty electricity levels come down. And I'd say 7 out of 10 houses we check, the telephone is not grounded, nor is the cable box. And we have the meter there, and we can watch the dirty electricity come down by connecting the ground.
If your house was built prior to the end of the Second World War, it was built before the building codes and electrical codes were put in place. So you had knob and tube wiring with ungrounded receptacles.
Yeah.
So there's no path to ground for your leaking current.
Yeah.
If your house was built after the Second World War, building codes came into play, and it was wired with a 3-wire system, and there was a path to ground. So you might want to look at that depending on the age of your house.
So we've come to the end of this presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Perry. People are affected differently in our community, and it's all relating around our utilities, and everybody's divided. Some are because of the bill, some are because of the air rate, some are the smart meters. So we need to hear what all the issues are, and that's why, again, this is not all going to be solved in one meeting here. You know, we just have to have the patience to hear people out, and that's the one thing I got to say about the Indigenous people. Sometimes they have meetings that go on for 3 days, and you get to talk, yes, and you know what I'm talking about, yes, okay, and everybody gets to talk and express.
Thank you for hearing us. We are the people who live in each land who don't have any power. Thanks to our stand against the smart meter, and contrary to what you've heard tonight, that I'm not an electrician or have no way to flash the grind, but if the smart meter is good, why is it being forced upon us deceptively by those who want us to have it? To start our story off, we had a man from BC Hydro come, and he said that we had a faulty analog and it would have to be replaced. My wife said, that's fine, we have no problem with that, but we don't want a smart meter. So we looked her straight in the face and said, you won't have one. Within 2 days, we had a smart meter on our place. And when he was showed up, and he says, or my wife saw him leaving our property, she went out and asked him, what are you doing back here? He said, with his bit of a grin on his face, I'm here to check your smart meter. She said, you told me you weren't going to put a smart meter on. He said, I'm very sorry, but there's obviously been a lack of communication, and somewhere down the chain of command, they made a mistake and you have it. She said, well then now you can make it right by taking it off. He said, that won't happen. You have it, and you will live with it. My wife phoned BC Hydro corporate office in Vancouver and got the runaround basically, and no real attention. I phoned them. They were polite enough to apologize for their error, but of course they could do nothing. We told them we would like the smart meter removed. More than once. We gave them a year to remove it. At the end of the year, we chose to take matters into our own hands. We ordered, contrary to what the paper says in the newscasts, a smart meter out of Florida, purchased it ourselves, an analog meter, out of Florida, certified, warranted, and guaranteed to be calibrated to meet the standards that are expected. The news would tell you that it was bought from the States, and of course it was...
No, the news is broadcasting, we bought it off the internet.
Yes.
That's not true. That's what BC Hydro is saying. We did our homework. I did my homework. I made sure we got one that even the BC Hydro people buy, the utilities companies buy from this company. It just wasn't right. And from the very beginning, my husband forgot to mention the reason I pointed out I did not want a smart meter is I already knew I was electromagnetic sensitive. I was having lots of symptoms. And since they put the smart meter on, my health has very much deteriorated. And so we had to do what we had to do what we did because of my health.
And just for the record, we have no microwave, we have no smartphones, we have cordless phones that we're talked about here.
No Wi-Fi, no nothing. We've really limited
On
our
the electromagnetic fields that are in our home.
prior to the smart meters. So we were trying to protect ourselves, or myself, because my husband doesn't have the sensitivities. But they just really ignored us.
So when the analog meter came, I personally removed the smart meter. We have photographed it and took a movie of it. We took pictures of the reading on the smart meter at the time we changed it. Took pictures of the new analog meter going in at zeroed out. We sent all this information to BC Hydro, telling them the date we did it, the time we did it, and made them aware of everything we did. Upon reception of this information, they again started to phone us with more urgency, and they finally we had their attention. There
was many threats made to myself because Dawn was at work and I had to deal with them at the door, that there was an ultimatum given. We need to either put another smart meter on or we need to turn your power off. So on April 17th, that's what they did in the afternoon. Wednesday afternoon, they turned our power off, gave us about 2.5 hours notice. But I didn't think they were allowed to do that. Isn't it technically still winter? That's our story.
Maybe you can.
Closer.
Okay.
Well, let me correct Kevin a little bit. When I took on CRA, I asked them several times not to come on my property, okay? And they decided that they were above the law. Great. So, I sued them. We had a settlement conference. In that settlement conference, the judge that was there suggested to them, if anybody's in the settlement conference, it's for one word, settlement. So you try to make an agreement between two parties. I did. They didn't think it was illegal what they were doing. I did. So we came to an agreement that if I dropped it from $10,000, my figure, to $1,000, that they would donate that $1,000 to Sally Ann, food bank, whatever it is. The two agents that were involved then agreed to it. They paid the $1,000. They haven't been back to my property. Simple as that. That's the way the law works. There is a trespass law, and they didn't adhere to it. That was their problem. They had to pay it. Or the CRA paid it. I don't really care. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not giving legal advice to nobody. I got involved with Kevin a year and a half ago in regards to the city of Penticton. I took my own actions, which I'm still happy to this day, okay with. I found many people, and I went around the province talking to probably 6 different areas down in the lower mainland, etc., telling them what I believed was a legal way to go about it. And there is a legal way to do it, and there's an illegal way to do it. By putting up all these signs and all that stuff is not my bag. You got to do it the legal way. So, what I did is I tried to tell people the way that I would suggest that they go about it. They didn't. To give you an idea, so I can back up what I'm saying, an Indian band asked me and my friend to do a legal notice to BC Hydro in regards to not installing them on their Indian band land. There's the legal notice, and I believe it was May 4th, was stamped and received by BC Hydro's main office down in Dunsmuir, with a copy hand-delivered by myself with a sworn affidavit to Corex over in the bottom of, near the Fraser River, and was in Burnaby. They were all legally served. There's all the signatures from the Indian band that signed that they didn't want them on their place. That's the legal way to do it. As of February, they still have their analog meters. Now so that worked. Let me say one other thing. In law, there's many ways to do things. A group that I was associated with years ago in the Okanagan was called Common Law Education and Rights Initiative. Our rights, whichever way we want to go about them. And whoever's in power has to adhere to those rights. That's our Constitution. One of the most important things that I found out by being involved with them for 10 years and other groups across Canada about our rights, etc., was all municipalities, towns, cities, etc., has the option to get interest-free loans from the Bank of Canada. I've known this for 25 years. This city and all other cities and towns do not go that route. Wouldn't it be nice to get interest-free money for all the infrastructure stuff that we're doing in the city of Penticton? I'd sure like it. So, on behalf of the people in Canada, a group that I'm associated with, called COMO, okay, filed a lawsuit against, and I'll read them off to you so you all know, in federal court, AG of Canada, Nels versus Ontario, the Minister of Finance, Minister of National Revenue, the Bank of Canada, the Attorney General of Canada. There's the file that was filed in about a year and a half ago. They've tried to get it dismissed, all these government idiots, as far as I'm concerned. Last December was the first hearing, dismissal hearing. Here's the answer to it. Okay? A decision has yet to come down. But if you read it, and it's in here, it'll tell you that our federal government, in conjunction with all your other governments, somewhere down the line, and it's right in here, took it upon themselves to stop that money flowing interest-free to all of us to help in the infrastructure. And they went to the IMF to get the money. And we pay interest on it like this. There's it. I'll gladly share the case. You can go get it. Have the documentation ready before you go to do anything. And that's where Hydro, in my opinion, and Fortis and all these guys are going to beat each individual. You don't have your documentation just like a court action ready to go after them. And if you don't have it, don't go into the ball game because you're going to lose. That's the way I see it. So what I say is Kevin's got one that he wants me to talk to. I think it's a corporation, a small corporation. I believe they probably got their records. They can go in and say, okay, for the last 3 years, I paid Fortis this much money every month. Right? They got to keep their records for CRA for 7 years. Then we can take that and say, okay, now this year, according to the rates we're getting with these two-tier system, it's going to be this many dollars. Bang! You go in, and if it's a word that the judges like to hear is it reasonable in the eyes of the average individual? That's what they like to hear. And is that reasonable that you've increased 30% or 40% or 20% because they went to a two-tier system and nothing else changed? I don't think it's reasonable. So that's where I think people have got to be. But you've got to do your homework. If you don't have your homework done, don't go in the ballgame. As simple as that.
Okay, so what can people do here? Like,
Get their records and get together a group meeting and, I don't want a whole bunch of people. I don't need this stuff. I'll beg anybody, his comments, I'll beg anybody to go into the court, the federal court. You can do it in Vancouver or what. I'll give you the file number. What I'm saying is true. There's the documents right there. There's the other document to back it up. William Krem, that I know from this group, he's 91 years old. He hopes he's not going to be dead before this comes to fruition. If you read it, it's going to be on the internet as soon as we get a decision made by the justice of the federal court. which we hope is going to be 30 days acceptable. I don't see a lot of politicians. I see that most of them have left.
Nobody understands the monetary system, and they don't understand.
It's so, there's my file that I've got going so far, and I haven't been in the meter stuff.
Way to
for-
go. Honest to God, I thought it was the